Simon, thank you very much. And I must say, I was very, very excited to hear Bruce's description there of just how many interesting ideas and technologies there are to address the specific and, in a sense, micro-level issues here in Hong Kong. And obviously linking back to the previous session and the comments of Agnes and others, how, government, in a sense, the key task is just to set the policies that are enabling to allow these technologies and solutions to be implemented, which then just leaves a little bit of a role, I guess, for some finance to come and support those, and that's really to my topic. I did want to start, though, with a reference to a famous English playwright, contemporary playwright. Some of you may have heard of a chap called Alan Bennett, who, amongst many great works, one of my favorites was a play called The History Boys. And to Simon's introduction, my idea here is the students in that play are challenged as to the meaning of history, and one of the suggestions is that perhaps by looking at history, that's a good way to think about what the path forward might look like. So with that in mind, a review of 2018. I'm going to try and use the clicker here. So 2018, sustainable finance themed around what's going on in Hong Kong, started Tuesday, the 2nd of January, 9 a.m. This company, Swire Properties, initiated investor meetings around what became a very successful green bond issuance, the first for the Swire Group. This was also the first transaction that was assured under the new sparkling, newly launched HKQAA Green Finance Certification System. So already, minute one of the new year, Hong Kong was moving forward, and of course, as this deal successfully closed, Hong Kong moved to #1 in the global league tables of green finance issuance. So fast out of the gates, we might say. February, sovereigns around Asia-Pac really came to the party in terms of sustainable financing. The Republic of Indonesia, after a little bit of a delay because they had to wait for appropriate market conditions. There was choppiness early in the year. In fact, there was choppiness throughout much of the year. But the Republic of Indonesia became the first Asian sovereign to issue a green bond. It was issued in Sukuk, or Islamic format, $1.25 billion raised. Use of proceeds fundamentally to address, in a sense, a series of challenges in Indonesia that in a way summarize a lot of emerging Asia's challenges, an economy that's highly based or dependent at the current time on hydrocarbons, needs to transition to low carbon energy, low carbon transport, and also a country which has huge natural resources that it needs to protect and preserve, whilst at the same time considering the opportunities and economic developments for a population that in many cases is financially or economically disadvantaged. And if all that weren't enough, a country which at the same time is massively exposed to the cruel impacts of climate change, thinking of the increasing intensity of the El Niño storm system, for example, that subjects those disadvantaged and vulnerable communities to intermittent periods of high flooding and high drought. So financing specifically to address that. And then, of course, later in the month, Hong Kong in the budget announced, to excitement, I'm sure, of everyone in this room, the $100 billion program. Inaugural issuance to happen in this fiscal year. So we're all watching that space carefully. Moving on through the year, March. What did we see in March? Well, March, more of the capital markets coming to the table, this time in the form of the commercial banks and the introduction of green loan products. We've talked about green bonds, the green loan principles, which were driven out of this city by the Asia-Pacific Loan Market Association, drawing in the Loan Market Association in Europe to create a green loan product, green loan principles published on, I think, the 19th of March, which happened to be the same day that one of Hong Kong's major corporates, the New World Group, published its green financing framework and implemented a green loan in line with those principles. So we now have the banks with products ready to participate and add scale and capacity to this essential task of driving more capital towards green and sustainable investments. And at the bottom, something we may see more of this year, the first in Asia of what's called a sustainability improvement loan, similar to, but don't get it confused with a green loan. It's a loan where the borrower is incentivized by a prospective reduction in its cost of funds, loan margin, in the event that it achieves certain ESG targets. Slightly different from a green loan because it doesn't require green use of proceeds, but we can discuss the technical details later. April, Hong Kong's first Hong Kong dollar denominated green bond. Thank you to the World Bank, again supporting Hong Kong, showing market leadership. June, of course, the Green Finance Olympics arrived in Hong Kong in the format of the Green Bond Principles Annual General Meeting, the annual conference for the Green Bond Principles together with the Social Bond Principles. That was the 14th of June. 1,000 people, or more than 1,000 people at that event, including, I suspect, a number of you in this room. The second day of the series was the Monetary Authority with the PBOC, very much focused on Hong Kong's role in bringing capital and working together with China. So green finance becoming very, very real here in Hong Kong, middle of the year. Let's not forget the rest of the region. Notable from 2018 is how South Korea came to the market. A few of the names who issued here, in aggregate 14 names, $4 billion raised in green, social and sustainability format out of Korea in 2018. A lot of it going to social uses, very interesting. Korea adopted social use of proceeds, particularly for its banks, addressing, again, needs of disadvantaged sections of society. August, one of my favorite transactions. What's a university issuing green bonds for? Well, I thought maybe there's a green building being built. Well, there was, but actually when you think through the context here, of course, universities are, by their definition, including the UST here, creating people's futures. So why would you do that in a building that at the same time is then destroying those futures? So message here, diversity of application of the green finance products. So appealing, attracted a 50 million ticket from a North Asian life company at 25-year money. Wasn't expected, just showing that you get great financial outcomes as well from going in sustainability format. August, some research from our guys to talking about why green. This goes to pricing. The top one, very briefly, is a story to issuers. Launch a green funding program. That's a communication to investors that you're well governed, you're managing costs, you're driving revenues, and the evidence shows that in the 1 year post-inaugural green issuances, green issuers were seeing their yield curves tighten versus the yield curves of entities who weren't launching green finance programs. So credit markets are listening to the sustainability story. From the investor perspective, easier to read this one. You can see how green bonds performance from Jan 2017 outperforming non-green bonds. Better alpha for the investors. Then, of course, September, 16th, 17th, a reminder of Mankut. This was my view of Mankut. Stopped me getting to the office. Costs of climate change. Well, I was busy working that morning until about 11 or 12 o'clock. Our system for remote access got overloaded. That's why I went out and took this photograph. Small, but perhaps just a small example of a cost. Mankut, third T10 or higher in 20 years. All of them have happened in the last 5 years, right? And wind speeds for Mankut 20% higher than for Hato in 2017. Climate coincidence, I don't know. I'm not a meteorologist. Colleagues at the UST will be able to answer that, but it seems slightly suspicious to me. The climate might be changing. So what did Hong Kong do? Quick to act, as always, in Hong Kong. 5 days later, 21st of September, the Green Finance Association was launched. Carrie Lam was there. Amazing how things can move when there's a bit of a crisis. Hong Kong Green Finance Association, the name of this game is about making Hong Kong a bigger and more effective green finance center. That doesn't just mean raising more capital for regional businesses here out of Hong Kong, but also making the whole financial system here more effective in its role of driving capital. On the same day, the SFC announced new guidelines taking Hong Kong to the top, a pathway to obligatory ESG disclosures in corporate financial reporting, and a pathway to requiring managers of money, investment houses, money managers, to actually disclose what they want the companies that they're investing in to disclose to them in respect of ESG. Again, Hong Kong leadership. October, IPCC, we've heard all about that and the dramatic shift that the curve on the right shows down the bottom. Yes, same month, William Nordhaus got his Nobel Peace Prize for his particularly development of modeling, the DICE model that enables you to look at this sort of cost-benefit analysis as assessment as to what's the optimal climate warming we should allow in an economic context, and then how do we set policy to get there. Clear recommendations, there's got to be carbon pricing in there. That's the clear message coming out of his work. November, China, couldn't talk about a green financier without talking about China. China Construction Bank issued their inaugural green in that month. That meant now all of the big 4 Chinese commercial banks have raised green. We also in that month had the first sustainability bond from a Chinese bank and the first Chinese bank to raise Hong Kong dollars from its branch in Hong Kong. This also happened at the same time. The second metro company in China raised, that was Wuhan, to go with Tianjin, who'd raised earlier in the new year. China gets green finance. China's playing big. China is 60% of the Asia-Pac market and 18% of global volumes. If I might just take 60 seconds, a little warning here. Mexico, it's not all perfect in the world of green bonds. A reminder that a green bond is still a bond, and there are still risks around these. Mexico was due to raise, or had raised $6 billion to finance a new green airport. The new government came in, cancelled the project. So clearly those proceeds were no longer going to a green project. So S&P and Moody's in their green bond assessments obviously dropped the categories. Also to remember, but separate in terms of the credit consideration, obviously those investors now wondering where will the proceeds be, will there be a buyback, and so on and so forth. So a reminder, green finance, it's not a magic new soft form of capital. They're real bonds, they're real issues. Use them carefully and appropriately. December, Katowice, yes, that's what this session is about. My observation from that was the young lady Greta Thunberg, who stood up and made that point to leaders, you know, when are you going to stop destroying my future? She also made the other, I think, tangible comment and said, actually, if you're a leader and you don't understand or know what the Keeling curve is, you can't call yourself a leader. Arguably, this is the key output metric that judges whether our efforts are successful or not, and in my view should be front and center of every single business presentation that we make if we really are to address these challenges. So, global markets, green finance, 207 billion in 2018. That was about 20% up on 2017. Growth in social, as I said, but that's still the smaller part. It's still mostly green. Asia represented about 30% of global markets. From the perspective of a little bank over the road, we did 41 green-labeled finance transactions in 2018. Yes, that means we're brilliant, but know what the real message is, that these markets are real, and we now have real traction. But as I'm sure Greta would say, if I put that comment up, well, Jonathan, that's all very well, but how much impact have you had on the Keeling curve? And the answer is not very much yet. So we are really at only the beginning of this journey. Let's not forget that. So to finish, finally, for Jim, back to Alan Bennett and the History Boys. I hope this quick run-through has not just been selective extracts of history to suit my own personal story. I hope this quick run-through has not been so boring that it's just one effing event after another, as the students thought it was. But I hope that this is a portent for the work done in 2018, the foundations that sets for doing much, much more as we go into 2019 and beyond, and obviously look forward to working with all of you in that task. Thank you.